Hello, today we'll be going over this article if it chooses to load. Right. Surveillance pricing from June 5th, 2024 by Cory Doctorow. Noted anti-capitalist agitator Adam Smith had it right. Isn't Adam Smith the guy who made capitalism? Oh my god. Of course. He's the... Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the guy who made capitalism, is it not? Wealth of Nations. Yeah, this is the guy. The father of capitalism. There you go. Interesting. People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion. But the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public, or in some contrivance to raise prices. He said that people of the same trade seldom meet together, but when they do meet, the conversation ends in conspiracy against the public or prices being raised. Interesting. Despite being a raving commie loon, Smith's observation was so undeniably true that regulators, policymakers, and economists couldn't help but acknowledge that it was true. The trust-busting era was defined by this idea. If we let the number of companies in a sector get too small, or if we let one or few companies get too big, they'll eventually start to rig prices. What's more, once an industry contracts corporate gigantism, it will become too big to jail, able to outspend and overpower the regulators charged with reining in its cheating. There should be a G there, no? Reining in its cheating. Anyone who believes Smith's self-evident maxim had to accept its conclusion that companies had to be kept smaller than the state that regulated them. This wasn't about punishing bigness, it was the necessary precondition for a functioning market economy. We kept companies small for the same reason that we limited the height of skyscrapers, not because we opposed height or failed to appreciate the value of a really good penthouse view, rather, to keep the building from falling over and wrecking all adjacent buildings and the lives of the people inside them. Just a second. Starting in the neoliberal era, Carter, then Reagan, we changed our tune. We liked big businesses. A business that got big was doing something right. It was perverse to shut down our best companies. Instead, we'd simply ban big companies from rigging prices. This was called the consumer welfare theory of antitrust. It was a total failure. 40 years later, which is now, I guess, nearly every industry is dominated by a handful of companies, and these companies price gouge us with abandon. Worse, they use their gigantic rip-off winnings to fill war chests that fund the corruption of democracy, capturing regulators so they can rip us off even more, while ignoring labor, privacy, and environmental law and ducking taxes. This is true if we look at the consumer companies like chocolates or soaps or anything. It's all just four big companies that own everything in every industry. It turns out that gigantic, opaque, complex corporations honest that keeping gigantic, opaque, complex corporations honest is really hard. They have so many ways to shuffle money around that it's nearly impossible to figure out what they're doing. Digitalization makes things a million times worse because computers allow businesses to alter their processes so they operate differently for every customer and even for every interaction. You would think that digitalization makes things better because everything's recorded and like kept properly, but interesting. This is Dieselgate times a billion. Volkswagen rigged its cars to detect when they were undergoing emissions testing and switched to a less polluting, more compliant mode. But when they were out on the open road, they spewed lethal quantities of toxic gas, killing people by the thousands. Computers don't make corporate leaders more evil, but they let evil corporate leaders execute far more complex and nefarious plans. Ah, I see. Interesting. Digitalization is a corporate moral hazard, making it just too easy and tempting to rig the game. That's why Toyota, the world's largest car manufacturer, just did Dieselgate again, more than a decade later. Digitalization is a temptation no giant company can resist. Wait, really? How recent is this? 3 days ago. Damn. More than 11 million in 2023. That's a lot. Do not affect safety. But what's the scandal? Accused of modified vehicles during safety collision. Wow. Short article as well. Interesting. For 40 years, pro monopoly cheerleaders insisted that we could allow companies to grow to unimaginable scale and still prevent cheating. They passed rules banning companies from explicitly forming agreements to rig prices. About 10 seconds later, new middlemen popped up offering information brokerages that helped companies rig prices without talking to one another. Take AgriStats. The country's hyper concentrated meatpacking industry pays AgriStats to consult on prices. They provide AgriStats with a list of their prices, and then AgriStats suggests changes based on its analysis. What does that analysis consist of? Comparing the company's prices to its competitors, who are also AgriStats customers. Oh my god. In other words, this company finds the highest price for each product in the sector, then advises all the companies with the lower prices to raise their prices to the competitive level, creating a one-way ratchet that sends the price of food higher and higher. More and more sectors have an agri-stats, and digitalization has made this price gouging system faster, more efficient, and accessible to sectors with less concentration. Landlords, for example, have tapped into RealPage, a data broker that does the same thing to your rent that AgriStats does to meat prices. RealPage requires the landlords who sign up for its service to accept its recommendations on minimum rents, ensuring that the prices only go up. Writing for the American Prospect, Luke Goldstein says that lays out the many ways in which digital intermediaries have supercharged the business of price rigging. Popular.info. What is this? Rents have skyrocketed. The many reasons. Criminal. Oh, go away. Wow. Last month they did a raid. Fascinating. Why are they focused on Atlanta? Wow. Okay. Then what is this? Prospect.org. Three algorithms in a room. Oh my god. Okay. Maybe I'll read this one day because it looks interesting. A growing number of industries. I'll read this one day. Goldstein identifies a, a kind of patient zero for this rip-off epidemic. Jeffrey Roper, a former Alaska Air exec who quit to found an illegal airline price-fixing service called ATPCO. ATPCO was investigated by the DOJ in the 1990s, but the enforcers lost their nerve and settled with the company, which agreed to apply some ornamental fig leaves to its collusion machine. Even those cosmetic changes were seemingly a bridge too far for Roper, who left the US. But he came back to serve as RealPage's principal scientist, the architect of a nationwide scheme to make rental housing vastly more expensive. For Roper, the barrier to low rents was empathy. Landlords felt stirrings of shame when they made shelter unaffordable to working people. Roper called these people idiots who sentimentally cost the whole system. Sticking a rent gouging computer between landlords and the people whose lives they ruin is a classic accountability sink, as described in Ben Davies' new book, The Unaccountability Machine: Why Big Systems Make Terrible Decisions and How the World Lost Its Mind. It's a form of empiricism washing. If computers are working in the abstract realm of pure numbers, they're just moving the objective facts of the quantitative realm into squishy, imperfect, qualitative world. Davies' interview on Trash Future is excellent. Okay. To rig prices, an industry has to solve three problems: the problem of coming to an agreement to fix prices, the problem of coming up with a price, and the problem of actually changing prices from moment to moment. This is the rip-off triangle, and like a triangle, it has many stable configurations. The more concentrated an industry is, the easier it is to decide to rig prices. But if the industry has the benefit of digitalization, it can swap the flexibility and speed of computers for the low collective action costs from concentration. Wait, what? Okay. For example, grocers that switch to e-ink shelf tags can make instantaneous price changes, meaning that every price change is less consequential. If sales fall off after a price hike, the company can lower them again at the press of a button. This means they can collude less explicitly but still raise prices. That's true. My name for this digital flexibility is twiddling. Businesses with digital backends can alter their business logic from second to second and present different prices, payouts, rankings, and other key parts of the deal to every supplier or customer they interact with. Not only does twiddling make it easier to rip off suppliers, workers, and customers, it also makes these crimes harder to detect. Twiddling made Dieselgate possible, and it's also underpinned Greyball, Uber's secret strategy of refusing to send cars to pick up transportation regulators who would be able to see firsthand how many laws the company was violating. That's so interesting. Oh, I gotta read this one. Twiddling is so easy that it brought price fixing to smaller companies and less concentrated sectors, though the biggest companies still commit crimes on a scale that put these bit players to shame. In The Prospect, David Dayen investigates the personalized pricing ripoff that has turned every transaction into a potential crime scene. Wow. Personalized pricing is the idea that everything you buy should be priced based on on analysis of commercial surveillance data that predicts the maximum amount you're willing to pay. Proponents of this idea, like Harvard's Pricing Lab with its Billion Prices project, insist that this isn't a way to rip you off. Instead, it lets companies lower the prices for people who have less ability to pay. Oh my god. Wait, so is this someone who does this? The billion price? Yeah, this is a price for every person. And oh my god, what is this? What if I click here? Pricestats.com. What is this? Okay. This kind of weaponized credibility is totally on brand for the pro monopoly revolution. It's the same wishful thinking that led regulators to encourage monopolies while insisting that it would be possible to prevent bad monopolies from raising prices. And as is with monopolies, personalized pricing leads to an overall increase in prices. In econ speak, it is a transfer of wealth from the consumer to the seller. Personalized pricing is one of those cuddly euphemisms that should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. A more apt name for this practice is surveillance pricing, because the personalization depends on the vast underground empire of non consensual data harvesting. A gnarly hairball of ad tech companies, data brokers, and digital devices with built in surveillance, from smart speakers to cars. Most of this surveillance would be impractical because no one wants their car, printer, speaker, watch, phone, or insulin pump to spy on them. The flexibility of digital computers means that users always have the technical ability to change how these gadgets work so that they no longer spy on their users. But an explosion of IP law has made this kind of modification illegal. What? This is why apps are ground zero for surveillance pricing. The web is an open platform, and web browsers are legal to modify. The majority of web users have installed ad blockers that interfere with the surveillance that makes surveillance pricing possible. But apps are a closed platform, and reverse engineering and modifying an app is a literal felony. Several felonies, in fact. An app is just a web page skinned with enough IP to make it a felony to modify it to protect your customer privacy. Oh, protect your consumer privacy or labor rights. Right, interesting. I didn't know it was actually illegal to modify or reverse engineer an app. Google is leading a charge to turn the web into the kind of initiatifier's paradise that apps represent, blocking the use of privacy plugins and proposing changes to browser architecture that would allow them to felonize modifying a browser without permission. Apps are a twiddler's playground. Not only can they customize every interaction you have with them, but they can block you from recording and analyzing the app's activities. Worse, digital transactions are intimate, contained to the palm of your hand. The grocer whose e-ink shelf tags flicker and reprice their offerings every few seconds can be collectively observed by people who are in the same place and can start a conversation about, say, whether to come back that night and to throw a brick through the store's windows to express their displeasure. A digital transaction is a lonely thing, atomized and intrinsically shielded from a public response. This is true. The shielding is hugely important. The public hates surveillance pricing. I mean, yeah, can you imagine like you go to a restaurant and they tell you, hey, you're gonna pay this much even though the person next to you is paying this much? Have fun. Time and again, through all of American history, there have been massive and consequential revolts against the idea that every price should be different for every buyer. The Interstate Commerce Commission was founded after gangsters rose up against the rail company's use of personal pricing to gouge farmers. What? Oh, not gangsters, grangers. My bad. Companies know this, which is why surveillance pricing happens in secret. Over and over, every day, you are being gouged through surveillance pricing. The sellers you interact with won't tell you about it. So, to root out this practice, we have to look at the B2B sales pitches from companies that sell twiddling tools. One of these companies is Plexure, partly owned by McDonald's, which provides the surveillance pricing backends for McDonald's, IKEA, 7-Eleven, White Castle, and others. Wait, how is McDonald's doing this? Don't they have like a banner that says all their prices? Do they update that day to day? Same with IKEA. Same with. Do these companies update their prices day to day? I didn't know that. Interesting. Basically, anytime a company gives you a hard sell to order via its apps rather than its storefronts or its website, they do it on their apps. They can't do it in the store. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You should assume you're getting twiddled hard. Yeah, don't download apps. Apps are evil. These companies use the insuredification playbook to trap you into using their apps. First, they offer you discounts to First, they offer discounts to customers who order through their apps. Then, once the customers are fully committed, they introduce surveillance pricing and start to jack up the prices. For example, Plexure boasts that it can predict what day a given customer is getting paid on and use that information to raise prices on all the goods the customer shops for on that day, on the assumption that you're willing to pay more when you've got a healthy bank balance. Hey, I realize that it's the 1st of June and you just got paid, so the person sitting next to you is only gonna pay $300, but you get to pay 400. The surveillance pricing industry represents another reason for everything you use to spy on you. Any data your smart TV or Nest thermostat or Ring doorbell. There are smart thermostats now? Oh, thermostat, not thermometer. Okay. Yikes, man. Can steal from you. Wait. Any data that these gadgets can steal from you can be readily monetized. Just sell it to a surveillance pricing company which will use it to figure out how to charge you more for everything you buy, from rent to Happy Meals. But the vast market for surveillance data is potential weakness for the industry. Put frankly, the commercial surveillance industry has a lot of enemies. The only thing it has going for it is that so many of these enemies don't know what they're really upset about is surveillance. Some people are upset because they think Facebook made Grampy into a QAnon. Others they think because Insta gave their kid anorexia. Some think TikTok is brainwashing millennials into quoting Osama bin Laden. Some are upset because the cops use Google location data to round up Black Lives Matter protesters or Jan 6 insurrectionists. Some are angry about deepfake porn. Some are angry because black people are targeted with ads for overpriced loans or colleges. And some people are angry because surveillance feeds surveillance pricing. The thing is, whatever else all these people are angry about, they're all angry about surveillance. Are you angry that ad tech is stealing a 51% share of news revenue? You're actually angry about surveillance. Are you angry that AI is being used to automatically reject resumes on racial, age, or gender grounds? You're actually angry about surveillance. There's a very useful analogy here to the history of the ecology movement. As James Boyle has long said, before the term ecology came around, there were people who cared about a lot of issues that seemed unconnected. You care about owls, I care about the ozone layer. What's the connection between charismatic nocturnal avians and the gaseous composition of our upper atmosphere? The term ecology took 1,000 issues and welded them together into one movement. That's what's on the horizon for privacy. The US hasn't had a new federal consumer privacy law since 1988. Wow. When Congress acted to ban video store clerks from telling the newspapers what VHS cassettes you were renting. They acted to ban. That's so funny. We are desperately overdue for a new consumer privacy law, but every time this comes up, the pro surveillance coalition defeats the effort. But as people who care about conspiratorialism, kids' mental health, spying by foreign adversaries, phishing and fraud, the surveillance pricing all come together, there will be an unbeatable coalition. Meanwhile, the US government is actually starting to take on these rip-off artists. The FTC is working to shut down data brokers. Let's go. The FBI is raiding landlords to build a case against FrontPage and other rent price fixers. AgriStats is facing a DOJ lawsuit. Not every federal agency has gotten the message, though. Trump's Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, whom Biden kept on the job, has been hiking interest rate in a bid to reduce our purchasing power by making millions of Americans poorer and unemployed. He's doing this to fight inflation on the theory that inflation is being caused by us being too well off and therefore trying to buy more goods than are for sale. Okay, wow. Economics, am I right? But of course, interest rates are inflationary. When interest rates go up, it gets more expensive to pay your credit card bills, lease your car, and pay a mortgage. And where we see the price of goods shooting up, there's abundant evidence that this is the result of greedflation, companies jacking up prices and blaming inflation. Interest rate hawks say that greedflation is impossible. If one company raises its prices, its competitors will swoop in and steal their customers with lower prices. Maybe they would do that if they didn't have a toolbox full of algorithmic twiddling options and a deep trove of surveillance data that let them all raise their prices together. Someone needs to read some Adam Smith to Chairman Powell. People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion. But the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices. Nice.